From a seller trying to make 20,000 bucks from dinosaur eggs to a former FBI agent who brought in Saddam Hussein's fingerprints, here are the most insane items brought into Pawn Stars. Out of all the crazy things the show has seen, I never thought someone would bring in real dinosaur eggs to sell for a profit. Yep, the seller thought they'd be worth a decent chunk of change and ended up asking Corey to buy them for $20,000. Whoa, can you imagine? Unfortunately, to the seller's surprise, they weren't exactly worth even half that amount. A dinosaur expert was brought in to check the authenticity of the product, and he identified the eggs as belonging to a duck-billed dinosaur called Dendrolithus, so they were definitely real. Interestingly, the dino expert also pointed out that these particular types of eggs are actually way more common than you'd think and are very easily available on the international market. Who would have thought? With the ease of their availability, the eggs were worth only $300 to $600, and Corey ended up buying them for a mere $500, which is a far cry from the original offer. While the dino lady wasn't so successful at turning her ancient finds into a profit, someone else on the show was. An owner of an antique ship bell came into the store, claiming that the treasure was from a ship that was owned by the Dutch East India Company dating all the way back to 1602. Obviously, the validity of the product had to be confirmed, and an expert was quickly brought in. One of the main reasons that Richard thought the item might have been a forgery was because he felt it was in too good of a condition to have been submerged in salt water for that long and not have retained as much damage. Well, to the Harrison family's surprise, the expert confirmed that the bell was indeed the real deal and worth a whopping $15,000. I'm sure you can imagine how happy the bell owner must have been to hear that. Ancient dinosaur eggs and antique bells aside, I'm sure the Harrisons never thought someone would walk in their door with a Grammy Award to sell. This particular Grammy had quite the story of how it got there in the first place. Originally, it was awarded to Ronald Dunbar and General Johnson for their song Patches back in 1970 in the Best R&B Song category. It then somehow made its way to a person who was in need of a lawyer and gave the same award to the lawyer as a form of payment. More than 2 decades later, the lawyer came to Rick with the Grammy and claimed it was worth $15,000. After some serious negotiation, Rick purchased it for $2,350, which is definitely an odd number if you think about it, but his original offer started at only $1,500. The lawyer certainly knew what he was doing and got himself an extra $850 out of the bargaining. I mean, this guy's got some serious game, and even Rick offered him a job. Can't really blame him. That sales pitch was pretty darn great. But even a Grammy Award wasn't the most unique item brought on the show. A man, who's hopefully never robbed a bank in his life, walked into the shop with a rather rare item, an exploding pack of $1,000 in bills of tens. He explained that during robberies, this fake stack would be snuck into the bag along with the real money. As the criminal would leave the bank, the pack would explode, coating both the money and the robber in a colorful dye. That way, it was easy to expose the criminal in public, and it made the real money completely useless. Kind of genius if you think about it. To confirm the legalities of buying the product, Rick brought in an expert, Mark, who confirmed that it was okay to purchase. After a few rounds of negotiation that started with the seller asking for $500, Rick eventually bought the stack for $175, only because he was curious. Well, the item was definitely something unusual, much like the Egyptian cartonnage mummy mask brought in by another seller. It's not every day that you get to see an ancient mask brought in by a seller claiming to be from the 2nd century AD, asking $70,000 for it. If you were Corey, you'd probably want to call in an expert too, right? You gotta authenticate these things. In comes Dr. Phineas Castle, who always has the most interesting information when it comes to ancient artifacts. Not only does the man know his stuff, but he's also got a rather over-the-top, unique fashion sense and a killer mustache, which I don't know why or how, but really helps in believing every word he says. The man took a few seconds to examine the mask in question and determined that it was the real deal. The value was put around $22,500, but because it was such a unique piece, Dr. Castle confirmed it could go for an even higher price. The seller, Jad, wouldn't go for less than $30,000, and despite trying to negotiate, Corey ended up paying the asking price for it. Guess he wanted the mask pretty bad, huh? Now, Corey may not have paid the original asking price of $70,000 to the guy with the mask, but Rick certainly came very close to the figure for another novelty item. Fans know how the guy doesn't sit in his shop all day, waiting around for people to bring cool artifacts and ancient items. Sometimes he takes his own road trips to find those rare items, for which he's already got private buyers lined up. The next item was the Panama Pacific octagonal gold coin, dated all the way back to 1915, and Rick made it to Florida's biggest coin show just to get his hands on it. It looks like luck was on his side that day, since he ended up finding 2 of them and even convinced the owner to drop his original asking price from a solid $70,000, right down to $67,050. The deal was done, and Rick brought the coin back to be sold to a buyer that he had already lined up. I think that was a sweet deal for something so rare. The gold coin owner from Florida knew what the worth of his product was, but I'm not sure every person who walks into the shop knows what they're doing. You'd be surprised at the things people bring in sometimes. Like that one time a man very confidently brought in a pile of crap, literally. The episode starts with a man who walks in holding a special carrying case, which naturally got Chumlee curious. Inside the case, though, was a completely different story. The man opened it up to a disappointing load of waste, a can of elephant waste to be precise. The waste product even had a name, Zudu. The seller in question thought it was a rare novelty item and promptly asked for an outrageous purchase price of $10,000. Can you imagine? Most fans tend to believe that he was probably trolling the gang. Luckily, the Pawn Stars crew didn't take the bait, but Chumlee did end up buying the whole can for about $20. That's quite a big discount on the original price and would certainly make for an interesting conversation starter. How many people do you know who can say, "Let me tell you about the time I bought a can of elephant manure"? Only Chumlee could have had this happen to him. But you know what's even weirder than a can of elephant poo? A former FBI agent bringing in what he claims was Saddam Hussein's real fingerprints. When American soldiers found and arrested Saddam, he was fingerprinted as per protocol by the FBI. Former FBI agent Bill was in Iraq at the time Saddam was captured, and he claimed that a copy of those very same fingerprints was given to him as a gift. Weird choice for a gift, no? So good old Bill thought it would be great to bring those prints into the shop in Season 5. I guess we all have a somewhat vested interest in creepy stuff from time to time, even if we don't want to admit it. Rick mentioned that he doesn't like buying things that have a connection with evil, but there's definitely a big market for this kind of memorabilia. But with no idea what the value of such a thing would be, he ended up offering $1,500 to the seller. I guess the price was just too low for Bill, and he ended up walking, since he thought it could probably get him around $10,000 at auction. So there you have it, from a former FBI agent who brought in Saddam Hussein's fingerprints to a seller trying to make $20,000 from dinosaur eggs. These were the most insane items brought into Pawn Stars.